So the almost government shutdown got a lot of coverage last week. But what hasn't made the headlines is that while Congress was negotiating to keep the government fully funded and open, they also managed to screw over regular Americans once again. So in a minute, we'll tell you about how they did that by cutting billions of dollars from the IRS. But Cenk, first, I know you have some very strong feelings about this story. What do you think?
Yeah, so I said that Trump was a fake populist because the only major piece of legislation he passed last time around was corporate tax cuts. So he's about to come in, and what do the Republicans negotiate for? First, cut the IRS so that rich people can cheat on their taxes more. Doesn't seem like a populist position, does it? Let's give you the details.
Yeah, so here is what you need to know. As part of the 2023 budget deal, Congress cut $20 billion from the IRS's budget. So that was after the Inflation Reduction Act gave the agency $80 billion. But when Congress passed the bills to keep the government funded last week, they managed to cut another $20 billion from the IRS. That's because the language of the bill stated that all existing policy from last year's budget would be reinstated for this coming year. So the provision that cut $20 billion from the IRS was repeated. And that's bad news for ordinary Americans, but great news for the rich. Surprise, surprise. Here is why. The Biden administration officials said the additional cuts would add $140 billion to the national debt over the next decade by hamstringing the agency's ability to audit wealthy individuals and large corporations. The agency will conduct 400 fewer audits of major businesses each year and 1,200 fewer audits of high-income individuals. And that's because the more resources an individual or corporation has, the more expensive it is for the IRS to audit them. So the cuts also harm everyday Americans who are just trying to deal with the IRS. Here's more. More cuts would also force the IRS to dramatically reduce customer service for taxpayers, Deputy Treasury Secretary said last month. By 2026, the IRS would have enough resources to answer only 2 of every 10 phone calls to customer helplines, and wait times would increase to 28 minutes on average. What a nightmare. In the 2022 filing season, months before Congress approved the IRA, only 10% of taxpayer phone calls were ever connected to a live representative if callers stayed on the line through sometimes hour-long waits. The IRS now answers more than 85% of taxpayer calls with a wait of less than 3 minutes. Oh, so this is infuriating. Like, this is going to suck for everybody. This all feels a little distressing because it doesn't matter how big the eat the rich movement gets, it seems. I don't want to be a Debbie Downer, but large scale public movements in this country seem to just like kind of go completely unacknowledged by our lawmakers. They're so insulated from all of it. So once they have their seats in Congress or wherever, they can just do whatever they want for the time that they're there. And every election cycle, maybe they pop out and just say some nice things to get reelected. And then once they're back in, they just continue to do whatever they want. And the things that they do have long lasting repercussions. So even if they're voted out of office, the things that they do while they're there are going to stick around. Is there anything, Michael, we can start with you this time, that can maybe bring an end to all of this?
I mean, not as long as you have a divided caucus, yes, in the Republican caucus. So you talked about the deal they made in that budget deal. 38 of them still voted against it, right? And those are the people that are debt and deficit hawks. But if that comes up as a single item in a proposal, and there is an IRS bill or a fund the IRS bill, you can be sure that those people are going to vote against it or vote for it. And what it does is it does exactly the opposite of what they're saying. As you outlined just now, they are creating greater debt, right? As Wally Adeyemo said, all of that. So the provision cut $20 billion from the IRS. They did it again, and what they do is they take money out of the federal government, which pushes us further into deficit and into debt. And if these people are such debt and deficit hawks, they should not be supporting this kind of legislation. And the administration is going to come in, and there's going to be standalone legislation, I would bet, with this, because what they were able to work out in this budget, you'll have to remember, they're going to have to look at this again in March in order to keep the government open. There are going to have to be other deals. So this becomes a way of showcasing the hypocrisy of the very, very far right in the Republican caucus in the House, who are going to do everything they can to probably support this because they don't want to see their donors, their rich donors, have to go through the audits. Yet, they're also going to be creating far more debt.
Yeah, I want to build on that. First, Box is a YouTube member and just wrote in, so if I cheat on my taxes, will I get away with it this year? And Box, the answer is no, unless you're enormously wealthy. And I'll tell you why. We've covered this in other shows. The enforcement they always keep in is on the earned income tax credit, so that it affects working people, but that get paid the least. So that is enforcement they always do. Then the middle class, and then the rich get the least amount of enforcement. And so the 20 billion is going to be cut from the auditing of the rich. And so as I explained in my book, Justice Coming, the most conservative estimate is 6 to 1. For every dollar you cut from the IRS enforcement, you cost the federal government $6 of revenue they would have taken in. So that means that you put it $6 more in the hole. So in this case, it was a little bit above 6 to 1. They cut 20 billion and it's going to cost us about 140 billion. So it's going to add to the debt by $140 billion. And so the Republicans came in and that was their #1 priority. You remember that whole kerfuffle about, oh my God, well, do they want this or do they want that, raising the debt ceiling? And then all of a sudden it just got magically resolved. You remember where Trump backed away from his thread about the debt ceiling, and all of a sudden the Democrats and the Republicans voted together? And the one thing they all agreed on was, cut the IRS, cut it. That affects all of our donors,
yeah,
right? So to be fair to the Democrats, the reason that they cut it is because Joe Biden actually added a good deal of money to enforcement for the IRS in the beginning, and that was one of the things I gave him the most credit for. So Biden did a great job on that. But now, as we have this interregnum, the Republicans and Democrats both want to cut the IRS to protect their rich donors. So that was their so-called compromise in order to get that done.
And not to mention, it takes a lot longer to audit the taxes of a very wealthy person because generally speaking, they're much more, the documents are much more complex. The investments, the capital gains, all of it just takes naturally much more time. So by not having the resources to do that with, those are the ones that get dispensed with and say, well, we're not going to do that. We're going to go after these people who are violating the earned income tax credit. And so it creates exactly what Cenk just outlined. It's terrible.
Yeah, and this is why I don't love it when people say that the government should be run like a business, because it's not a business, right? Governing people is not about the bottom line, or it shouldn't be. Yes, there is money involved and you have to be cognizant of that. But at the end of the day, you have to make things livable for the American people. And what they're doing here by continually inflating the rich people and the corporations, they're making life a lot more difficult for the most average Americans. And we're the ones who are voting them into office. But the bureaucracy of all of this, I think, is really what's going to make people crazy. Those wait times, a 28 average wait time, is what they're predicting. That's going to make people crazy. The tax structure in this country is already so convoluted. Nobody even knows what's going on. The process of paying your taxes, even when you're trying to just pay your taxes, it's so stressful. It's so confusing. And all of this is just going to make all of that so much worse. I know Elizabeth Warren has proposed, just a way to just make things a lot more streamlined and easy for people, but they don't want that. They want it to be more difficult. They want people to feel frustrated, and they want the corporations to have all of the upper hand. So that's where we're headed.
If we were running this like a business, we would have shut down during the Industrial Revolution. We've been going into debt and been a terrible business since then. So that no business like this would ever stay open. Government is not a business, just as you said.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and by the way, just to be clear on why I say it only affects the rich, because what Biden added to IRS enforcement was only to people making, they were going to do audits and enforcement of only people making above $400,000 a year. So, because they make it seem like, oh, it's your taxes and we're helping you by getting rid of these guys that are going to audit you. No, they're literally getting rid of only the people who are going to audit the rich, because that's who their donors are. Thanks for watching The Young Turks, really appreciate it. Another way to show support is through YouTube memberships. You'll get to interact with us more. There's live chat emojis, badges. You've got emojis of me, Anna, John, JR. So those are super fun. But you also get playback of our exclusive member-only shows and specials right after they air. So all of that, all you gotta do is click that join button right underneath the video. Thank you.